Your person visit a doctor recently and said all this about you. When they asked them about, wait, pause for a second, something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted. And I don't mean in a dramatic, obvious way. I mean in the kind of way that happens behind the scenes, the way a season changes before you actually feel it in the air. Something in your person's world moved, quietly, without announcement. And it happened recently. Very recently, in a place you probably wouldn't expect. A doctor's office. Now stay with me here, because this is not what you think it is. This isn't about illness, or fear, or something going wrong. This is about something that came out of that appointment. Something that was said. Something about you, that your person couldn't hold back anymore, even when they were sitting in a sterile room under fluorescent lights. Being asked simple, routine questions, because that's the thing about love that's been buried for a while. It doesn't stay buried. It finds its way to the surface in the most unexpected places. And what your person said, what they admitted, in that room, when they thought no one would make much of it, that's what this is about. If this message speaks to your heart, comment, "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Now let's go back. Let's go back to the moment your person walked through that door. It was a regular appointment. Routine. Maybe a checkup. Maybe they hadn't been sleeping well. Maybe stress had been sitting on their chest a little too long, and someone close to them noticed and told them, "You should go see someone." Whatever the reason, they went. They sat in that waiting room with everyone else, staring at their phone, scrolling past things they didn't actually see, waiting for their name to be called. And when it was, they walked in, sat down, answered the basic questions, the ones that feel impersonal at first. How are you sleeping? Have you been eating regularly? Any changes in your stress levels? And that last one, that's where something shifted. Because when the doctor asked about stress, your person paused. Just for a second, just long enough that the doctor noticed and looked up from their clipboard. And in that pause was you. Not in an obvious way. Not in the way they would have said out loud a year ago. But in the way that certain people live inside us, quietly, persistently, showing up in the silences when we're forced to actually be still. Your person doesn't talk about you much anymore. Not to their friends. Not to family. There's a kind of dignity in silence, they've told themselves. A kind of strength. But silence and peace aren't always the same thing. And deep down, in a place they're still learning to look at clearly, they know that, because even in that clinical white-walled room, even with the blood pressure cuff around their arm and the doctor making small marks on a form, you came up. You were mentioned. And what came out of their mouth surprised even them. Stay with this. Because there's a deeper emotional layer here that most people miss. See. What happens to us when we've been separated from someone who genuinely mattered? Whether through distance, through silence, through a misunderstanding that grew too large, is that we build a kind of wall around that feeling. Not because we don't care, but because caring without resolution is exhausting. Because loving someone who isn't in your daily life anymore takes energy you're not sure you're allowed to spend. So your person did what most people do. They compartmentalized. They told themselves a story. We've both moved on. It wasn't meant to be. I'm fine. And for a while, it worked. On the surface, it worked. But the body keeps score. The body knows what the mind tries to manage. And stress, real stress, the kind that lingers in the chest and disrupts sleep and makes simple moments feel oddly heavy, it rarely comes from one place. It comes from the accumulation of unfinished things, unexpressed things, things we never fully said goodbye to, because somewhere inside us we weren't ready to say goodbye. Your person isn't in crisis. I want you to understand that. But they've been carrying something, quietly, for longer than they've admitted. And when the doctor asked, gently, the way good doctors do, "Is there anything going on in your personal life? Anything emotionally that might be contributing to this?" Your person looked down at their hands, and then they said your name, not dramatically, not with tears. Just said it, in the way you say the name of something real. The doctor didn't know the full story. They didn't need to. But your person kept talking, slowly, carefully, and what came out was something that had been locked up for a long time. They said they've been thinking about you more than they expected to. They said something about the way things ended, or didn't end, felt unresolved to them. Like a sentence that stopped mid-word. And then, this is the part that matters, they said something about regret. Not the loud, dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that shows up at 2 a.m. when you're staring at the ceiling, wondering not what you did wrong, but what you could have done differently. This is where things quietly begin to shift. Because regret, real regret, isn't about the past. It's about the present. It's your heart telling you that something still has weight, that something still has meaning, and people don't waste emotional energy on things that have truly stopped mattering to them. They just don't. Your person, talking about you in that room, in that honest, unguarded way. That wasn't random. That wasn't just stress talking. That was something surfacing. Something that's been waiting for the right quiet moment to come through. And the interesting thing, the thing they're still processing right now, is that saying it out loud made it more real. Not more painful, just more real. Like taking something out of a dark drawer and holding it in the light and realizing it's not as broken as you thought. Just unresolved. Just waiting. If you've felt this kind of unfinished feeling too, if you've carried something quietly that never fully made sense to you, you already understand what this is. Now here's what the doctor asked next. And this is the part your person didn't expect. They asked simply, "Do you miss them?" And your person didn't answer right away. They looked out the small window in the corner of the room. There was something outside, maybe a tree, maybe just sky. And they looked at it for a moment, like they were buying time, like they were checking something inside themselves before they spoke. Because "do you miss them" seems like a simple question. But it's not. It carries so much more than 4 words. It carries the whole story. It carries every moment of silence, every almost reached for phone, every time a song came on and the feeling came with it. It carries all of that. And your person quietly, honestly, said, "Yes, I think I do." What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything, because something cracked open in that moment. Not in a painful way, in the way that things crack open when they're ready to let light in. Your person didn't cry. They didn't fall apart. But they sat with that admission, that simple, truthful yes, and they felt the weight of it settle in them, like something finally landing after a long time in the air. The doctor said what doctors say. They offered the tools for managing stress, for processing emotion, for taking care of the nervous system. Practical things, gentle things. Your person nodded, took the papers, said thank you. But walking out of that office into the hallway, they weren't thinking about any of it much. They were thinking about you, about a specific moment with you. One quiet moment. Maybe you've forgotten it. Maybe you haven't. That kept coming back to them. Not a big dramatic memory. Something small. Something that somehow contained everything important. And they thought, why does that still stay with me? And then, softer than that, underneath it, maybe I let go too quickly. That thought didn't come with sirens or certainty. It came the way important things usually come. Quietly, almost reluctantly. Like it had been waiting at the door for a long time and finally decided to knock. Your person isn't the kind of person who admits things easily. Not to others. Not even to themselves. They've been told they're strong. They've told themselves they're strong. And they are, but strength and openness aren't the same thing. And for a long time, being strong meant not letting themselves fully feel the parts of this that still ached. But that day changed something. Small, almost unnoticeable. But real, because there's a difference between someone who has moved on and someone who has simply moved forward. Moving on means the chapter is closed. Moving forward means you're carrying the chapter with you. Still open, still breathing. Even as you keep walking, your person has been moving forward. Not on. And what they're beginning to realize now is something they can't ignore anymore. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a moment of honesty, not the uncomfortable kind, not the hollow kind, the kind that feels like the air after rain, cleaner somehow, lighter, like something that needed to happen finally did. That's the silence your person drove home in after that appointment. Windows up, music off. Just them and the road and everything that had just been said out loud for the first time. And here's what's interesting about that drive home, because this matters more than it seems. They didn't reach for their phone at a red light, didn't text anyone, didn't open an app to distract themselves from what they were feeling. They just sat in it, let the feeling be there without running from it. Which, for them, is not nothing. That's actually significant. Because your person has spent a lot of time recently keeping themselves busy enough to avoid exactly this, the stillness. The honest inner quiet where the real things live. But that day they'd let it be still, and in that stillness, something that had been abstract for a long time started to take shape. They thought about the last real conversation you two had, not the surface-level ones, not the ones where everything was technically fine but emotionally hollow. The last real one where something genuine passed between you, where you were both present in the way people rarely are with each other, and they realized, sitting at that red light, that they had replayed that conversation more times than they would ever admit, not obsessively, not in a way that consumed them, but the way a meaningful song stays in the background of your life. You don't always notice it playing, but when it stops, you feel the absence. That's what you've been for them lately. A background presence they'd been trying to mute without fully realizing that's what they were doing. Stay with this, because this is where the emotional layers start to deepen. See, when we distance ourselves from someone who truly affected us, we don't actually create distance from the feeling. We just delay the reckoning with it. We move the feeling to a back room and close the door and tell ourselves it's handled, and life cooperates for a while. Days get full, routines take over. You laugh with other people, share meals, make plans. But then something happens. A quiet doctor's appointment, an unguarded moment, an honest question asked by someone who had no idea what they were unlocking. And the back room opens. Not violently, just opens. And you're standing there, looking at everything you stored away, and realizing it's still in exactly the condition you left it in. That's where your person is right now. They're not falling apart. They're not spiraling. They're just standing in the doorway of that room, looking at what's inside, and letting themselves see it clearly for maybe the first time. And what they're seeing, what's becoming undeniable to them, is that a lot of what happened between you two wasn't what they told themselves it was, the story they built to explain things, to make sense of the distance, justify the silence. That story made them the rational one, the one who kept their composure, the one who knew when to let go. And they believed that story because they needed to, because without it, they would have had to sit with a much harder truth, the harder truth being that they walked away from something real because real things are terrifying, not because they didn't care, but because they did, more than felt safe. This is the part they're still trying to understand. Your person, and I want you to hear this clearly, is not someone who opens up easily about this kind of thing. Even with the people closest to them, there are doors that stay shut, not out of coldness, out of the deep-seated belief that being fully known is also the fastest way to get hurt. So they've kept certain rooms locked, maintained a version of themselves that is present, warm, capable, but protected, with you though. And this is what keeps coming back to them. They remember moments when that protection dropped, when they said something honest without planning to, when they laughed in a way that was completely unguarded, when being around you felt less like performing wellness and more like actually being well. Those moments don't come easily to them. They never have, and losing access to those moments, losing you as the person who somehow made that possible, is what they've been grieving. even if they wouldn't have called it grief before today. Even if they've been calling it moving on, and being realistic and knowing when something is done. What happens next isn't dramatic, but it lands differently than anything else has in a while. Because that evening, after the appointment, after the quiet drive, after they made dinner and sat down alone and tried to watch something on TV that they didn't actually absorb, they did something they haven't let themselves do in a long time. They looked at something that reminded them of you. Maybe a photo, maybe an old message thread they hadn't deleted, even though they told themselves they should. Maybe just a place in their apartment where a memory lives. A chair, a corner of a room, a view from a window that you both once stood at together saying nothing in particular, which somehow made it everything. They didn't spiral, they didn't reach out, they just looked, and let themselves feel what that looking brought up, which was more than they expected. There was something close to tenderness there that surprised them. They expected heaviness, expected the dull ache that usually comes with thinking about you. But what showed up instead was something quieter, something almost warm. Like the feeling you get when you find an old letter from someone you loved. There's sadness in it, yes, but there's also gratitude. There's also the recognition that something in your life was genuinely good, genuinely rare. And that recognition, sitting with them in the quiet of that evening, started doing something. It started slowly dismantling the wall they'd built around the version of you they'd been keeping in that back room. Because here's what walls do that we don't always acknowledge. They don't just keep things out. They also keep us from seeing clearly what's inside. When we protect ourselves from a feeling, we also distort it. We flatten it into something manageable, something that makes sense within the story we need to believe. But your person, in that quiet evening, wasn't managing anymore. They were just feeling. Clearly, if this resonates, let it settle in you. Don't rush past this part. And what they felt, undiluted, unmanaged, honest, was that they missed you in a way that wasn't about neediness or weakness or unresolved wounds. They missed you in the way you miss something genuinely good. Something that made ordinary moments feel less ordinary. Something that made them feel like a slightly better version of who they usually are. That kind of missing isn't about dependency. It's about recognition. It's your heart identifying something valuable and refusing to pretend otherwise, no matter how inconvenient the timing, and your person's heart, after a very long time of being talked out of things, was finally refusing to be talked out of this. Now here's the layer that they haven't fully processed yet, the part that's still working its way through them. When they thought about you that evening, they didn't just think about the good, they thought about the moments they weren't proud of, the times they went quiet when they should have spoken. The times they pulled back when closeness was exactly what was needed. The times they let their fear of being hurt do the talking instead of their actual heart. And for the first time in a while, they didn't rush past that part, didn't excuse it or contextualize it or explain it away. They just held it, let it be uncomfortable, let it say what it needed to say. Because that's what real reflection looks like, not just fondness for what was good, but honest accounting of where you fell short. And your person, alone in that room, was doing that accounting, quietly, with more honesty than they've applied to this in a long time. And this is where understanding slowly begins. Because there's something that happens when you stop rewriting the story and just look at what actually happened. When you drop the narrative, the one that cast you as reasonable and others as complicated, the one that made the ending make sense, and you just see the moments as they were, imperfect, human, full of missed chances and half-expressed things and doors that could have been opened but weren't. Your person was sitting with all of that, and instead of feeling crushed by it, they felt something unexpected, clarity. The first real clarity they've had about this in a long time. Because clarity doesn't always feel like relief at first. Sometimes it feels like grief, like standing at the edge of something and finally understanding how far down it goes. But then, And this is the part that matters. You realize you're still standing, that you're okay, that the understanding, even the painful kind, is better than the fog. They went to sleep that night differently than they have in months. Not peacefully, exactly, but honestly. And sometimes honesty is the closer thing to peace you can get in a given moment. And that's enough. And in the space between wakefulness and sleep, that liquid, unguarded place where we stop performing even for ourselves, a single thought moved through them. Soft, not urgent, just present. I wonder if they know, not I wonder if they still care, or I wonder if they've moved on. Just, I wonder if they know what they meant to me, what they still mean to me. And that thought, simple as it sounds, carried the whole weight of everything they hadn't said. Everything they'd organized and stored and told themselves was finished. It was all in that one quiet wonder. They didn't act on it. Not yet. But something shifted in them that night. Something settled into a new position. Like a compass that had been slightly off for a long time, quietly correcting itself in the dark. And what's unfolding in them now? Slowly, without fanfare, without even a clear decision being made, is a new kind of willingness. Not desperation, not urgency. Just willingness. Willingness to stop pretending the feeling isn't there. Willingness to stop editing you out of their inner world, as if that were the same thing as healing. Willingness to sit with the possibility, just the quiet, open possibility, that what was between you isn't as finished as the story they told themselves. They don't know what to do with that willingness yet. That's okay. It doesn't need to be acted on immediately to be real. Sometimes the shift comes before the movement. Sometimes the heart adjusts before the hands do anything. But the shift has happened. And what comes next, what they're slowly, almost reluctantly moving toward, is something they haven't let themselves consider in a very long time. The possibility of reaching out, not from longing alone, not from need, but from something quieter and more honest than both of those things, from truth. And the question sitting with them now, the one they carried into sleep and woke up with the next morning, softer but still present, isn't if. It's how. How do you reach back towards someone after silence? How do you say, without script or pretense, I've been thinking about you, and I think I got something wrong, and I just wanted you to know that. They don't have the answer yet, but for the first time, they're not afraid of the question. And that is the real shift. Not the feeling itself, they've had the feeling for a long time, but the lack of fear around it, the willingness to walk toward it instead of away. What they do with that willingness, what they find, when they finally stop protecting themselves long enough to reach.